And I have the honor this evening to introduce Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin is an animal scientist, autism advocate, and inspiration to professionals, families, and individuals who experience life on the autism spectrum. In 1999, Dr. Tony Atwood, an expert and author in the field of Asperger's syndrome, said, "Temple is my hero. She has my vote for the person who has provided the greatest advance in our understanding of autism this century." A little over a decade later, Time magazine agreed with Dr. Atwood in naming her one of the 100 most influential people in 2010 in the category of heroes. Most of you have probably seen the HBO movie Temple Grandin that won 7 Grammy Awards. In addition to the Emmy Awards. In addition to the Emmy, Claire Danes, the actress portraying her, also won a Screen Actors Guild Award and a Golden Globe. Dr. Grandin simply expressed satisfaction that the movie helped educate people about autism. Now to speak to us about visual thinking, autism, and design, please welcome Dr. Temple Grandin.
Really great to be here today. We'll talk about a whole lot of things today. One of the things I can't emphasize enough is the importance of early educational intervention. Now, this wasn't shown in the movie, but by the time I was 2.5 years old and totally nonverbal and showing all the full symptoms of autism, I got a lot of really good speech therapy. My mother hired a nanny when I was 3 who did constant turn-taking games. You gotta teach these kids how to take turns. That's really important. Also, as a child of the 50s. In the 50s, boy, you were expected to have table manners. If I tried to comb my hair with my fork, I mean, no, you can't do that. You don't put it back down on the table. You don't comb your hair with your fork. That's the kind of stuff you just don't do. There's a lot of confusion now about diagnosis. I've just been watching on the American Psychiatric Association webpage. They keep changing the diagnosis all the time. I think Asperger's is going to turn into social communication disorder. Well, the thing is, it's still the same thing. Don't get hung up on these labels. They're behavioral profiles, and they are not precise, like a diagnosis for tuberculosis or hepatitis or some kind of disease like that. You either have it or you don't. It's a profile. It's also a continuum, going all the way from the geeks and nerds that run Silicon Valley and bring you things like computers, to people that remain nonverbal with other medical problems on top of that. It is a true continuum. That's what the scientific research shows. Now, in the first part of my talk, I want to talk about different kinds of thinking. Because one of the things, the kind of thinking I do, is you got to get away from verbal language. When I work with animals, I've got to get this computer where I can see it here. You know, in order to understand people that have autism and understand animals, you got to get away from verbal language. People that think in verbal language tend to drop out details. I'm just amazed how hung up people get on these diagnostic categories. Okay, they're going to drop the PDD-NOS, yeah, but now they're going to put social communication disorder in there to replace Asperger's, where when I looked at the webpage in December, they were going to put Asperger's in with autism. You know, you're talking about people sitting around in the conference room fighting over this stuff. You know, that's what it's really all about. And it's really turning into a bit of a mess. But I want to get you to think about thinking and cognition where you don't have verbal language. So that's going to help you understand a lot of people that are on the spectrum. My world and an animal's world, it's a sensory-based world. You know, you might have some nonverbal people on the spectrum. They're smelling everything, they're touching everything. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because hearing is like a bad mobile phone cutting in and out. They don't hear hard consonant sounds. I have a hard time hearing hard consonant sounds, and little differences like cat or rat. I have a very hard time knowing the difference unless I do it by context. And then you get the people that are tapping everything and smelling everything, seeing and hearing such a big jumbled up mess. Those systems aren't working right, that those senses still give them accurate information. That's why they're doing that. But I want to try to get you to think about thinking where you don't have language. Now I want to give you some ideas of how how mathematical thinking and visual thinking can be hidden underneath language. This is Van Gogh's Starry Night. And some mathematicians got a hold of this picture, and they analyzed the math in Van Gogh's painting. It had mathematics on it. I don't think Van Gogh knew anything about mathematics when he was painting that. But that shows that kind of thinking may be kind of buried in the brain. There's also a type of Alzheimer's that as the frontal cortex is wrecked and language gets wrecked, artwork appears. This doesn't happen with everybody with Alzheimer's, but it does happen with some of them. So you look at how the brain's set up. It's sort of like a big office building. And up at the top we got the president. That's the frontal cortex, the brain's CEO. That's connected to everything else. Now in autism, a lot of the circuits going up to the president's office are disconnected. And then you got language. That's the division vice presidents. Then underneath that you got good stuff like visual thinking, mathematical thinking, and you'll often have, on the higher end of the spectrum, uneven skills. We need to be working on building up the skill area. One of my handling facilities, but the point I'm trying to get across is in the movie, it shows a whole series of shoes flashing up in rapid succession. That is how I think. You know, there was a scene in there where it says, well, does it really have, they talk about animal husbandry, and I saw a picture of a husband and the cows dressed up for the wedding. Now, in designing equipment, I found that I could actually test run equipment in my head. I thought everybody could do that. I didn't realize when I was in high school that I actually did think differently. So when you go back and you work with some of these students, you know, some of them learn better with one method. Okay, everybody fights over how to teach reading. Some of these kids are going to learn whole word. Others are going to learn phonics. I'm now learning more about teaching phonics. There's like the quick and sloppy way, like the way I was taught, you know, just a few little simple rules. A lot of words don't obey the rules, but it's general enough, it works with the visual thinkers. Then there's like English logic, another like 150 rules, and the math kids like that because it's more precise. You know, so try different things, you know. The thing is a lot of education ideologies top down. We're going to cram them all into this. But the thing is, good teachers don't go along with that. And the thing I have found in so many situations is a good teacher just sort of instinctively knows how to work with kids to get them to do stuff. And my visual thinking was a great asset in my career designing handling facilities. Now I think we need to be getting a lot more emphasis on teaching job skills. Kids get into middle school, they need to be doing some job things. When I was 13 years old, I sewed dresses for a seamstress who worked out of her house. When I was 15, I built the gate that was shown in the movie, and all my projects were shown accurately. I took care of 9 horses. I did carpentry work. I did internships in a research lab. There needs to be a lot more emphasis thinking about what are they going to do when they grow up. Now, I didn't learn my cattle handling stuff overnight. I spent 3 years going to every feed yard in Arizona. It doesn't happen overnight. And there's the dip vat system that was used in the HBO movie. They actually recreated one of my projects from the 70s. All the cattle handling scenes, they were real. That was all real equipment. You know, they did one little tiny slaughter scene that was photoshopped, but the rest of it was real. And I have to say I had a lot of input into the cattle stuff because we didn't want any city slicker stupid stuff with any dairy cows on it, that's for sure. I think I just want to do a little sidetrack right now on medication. I'm absolutely appalled at the amount of powerful drugs given out like candy to little kids. It's appalling. I went to a major university. I'm not going to say where it was. It was somewhere in this country, and they had a neurologist there that was handing Risperdal out to 3-year-olds for a sleep aid. You don't use that kind of a powerful drug as a sleep aid. Why don't we try some exercise first? Why don't we try getting 10 tons of sugar out of the diet? Let's get rid of Pop-Tarts for breakfast. And because if I don't have a little decent animal protein for breakfast, I get all headachy and lightheaded, and it's just absolutely awful. I'm never going to be a vegan. I couldn't be even if I wanted to be. I got to have some serious animal protein at breakfast in order to... No, seriously, I can't get through the day otherwise. And there's some kids that respond to some of these diets, especially if you've got gastrointestinal problems. Now, I want to add there is a place for medication, but you need to use it carefully and conservatively. And the younger the kid is, the more careful you need to be with it. And a real good principle is, you try a medication, it should have some wow factor. Like, oh, wow, this really works. You don't give out powerful drugs to make them a little less hyper or as a sleep aid. That's something you just don't do. And for anxiety, one of the things that really works is a little tiny dab of Prozac. Take a little tiny dab of Prozac or one of the other SSRI drugs in the morning, throw down a little blood pressure pill at night. I know people that are taking beta blockers, an old propanolol. It's an old blood pressure pill and really cheap. Those work really well for sleep aids. Maybe clonidine, which is another blood pressure pill. Those are sensible medications. Now, the thing I want to warn is that people on the spectrum often need a much lower dose of something like Prozac. You give them too much Prozac or Zoloft, you're going to get agitation and insomnia. The doses often have to be way, way, way lower. And I know there's genetic tests coming out where they'll be able to tell, looking at the liver enzyme metabolism, who's going to need these low doses, but I don't think those tests are available yet. I think it's only in the research stage. But I have it all explained and thinking in pictures, but I'm sick and tired of hearing parents say he did great on the little dose, and then when we gave him more, it was absolutely horrible. And I've been getting too many memory complaints on Paxil, so I'm not very high on that drug. I know a lot of design professionals that are taking Prozac, works really well, and it's actually come out best on a meta-analysis where we looked at a whole pile of studies as far as autism is concerned. Now, what about the atypicals, Risperidol, and then the big fad right now, Seroquel and Abilify. Those are heavy-duty, powerful drugs. They can have a lot of bad side effects, like lots of weight gain, tardive dyskinesia, or it messes up your nervous system maybe permanently. You're talking about heavy-duty side effects. Now, there's some cases of aggression and some problems in older kids and adults where you might need to use that drug. But you got to remember, it's heavy artillery, and you want to use it in the lowest dose that will work. The other thing I want to get people to do is stop fighting about biomedical methods and regular medication. I use some of both. I'm taking an old-fashioned tricyclic antidepressant, but I'm also taking some really heavy-duty acidophilus. I've been doing this new solar ray, like billions of organisms. That seems to work really well with acidophilus and other kinds of things like that. Helps with some of my problems down below. And, but that's sensible stuff. You need to figure out what works. Try one thing at a time. Don't start a drug at the same time you start school. You don't know what worked. I want to try to get people to think much more logically. I find when you get out away from the main medical centers, it's a wasteland out there as far as the drugs they throw at things. There isn't any thought put into it. There's a problem, well, let's throw another prescription in. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I want to try to get people to think very specific. Remember, the autistic mind's bottom up. Think very specifically about it. All right. Now, one of the things you got to be doing is get different kinds of minds to work together. I'm seeing too many kids, they get labeled oppositional defiant, and all these crazy labels. Well, yeah, you make the kid do baby math, he gets bored, then he throws a little tissy and he's labeled oppositional defiant. I'm really getting concerned about how, I don't know, they don't seem to think the skills that you learn in things like wood shop and stuff like that are important. But those are the kind of things that saved me. I hadn't done those kind of classes, I would have gone nowhere. And there's a lot of good jobs there. Let's start thinking about jobs for the visual thinkers. The visual thinkers like me, we can do graphic design, we can do architecture, industrial design. In fact, what I do with cattle actually would be industrial design, photography, artwork, crafts, carpentry work, all kinds of things. Fixing computers, setting up AV equipment. You always big convention centers and stuff, they got people to set up AV equipment. And boy, there's a lot of kind of Asperger people doing that. Then how about our music and math minds? Well, they're half of Silicon Valley. Musicians, chemists, math teachers. When I was in college, I had a math teacher that collected phone books of all things. A whole house full of phone books. And then you got the word thinkers. Some of those would make good journalists. I know some radio personalities that probably are those, those kind of thinkers. See, the thing that drives me crazy is I see the grown-up versions of all three of these kind of autisms, the milder ones, employed in good jobs. And then I see Junior coming around at the autism meeting, and that's not where he's going. And it makes me really crazy, because you see, being a visual thinker, I see the people, I see the kids. I go out to Silicon Valley, or I go up to Science Fair in Minnesota, and I see all these little Asperger kids running around. And then when I go to Chicago, at a movie opening, Junior comes up to me, and he just wants to tell me about his autism. No. People ask me, would I snap my fingers and be not autistic? No, I like the logical way I think. I don't want to give up being autistic. But I'm a college professor first, an equipment designer first, an inventor, and a scientist first. Autism second. The thing is, no matter what label they slap on them, a lot of these kids have got sensory problems. And if there's one place where research needs to be done, it's on sensory problems. They vary from being nuisances, that's all it is for me now today, to totally debilitating. I know adults and children, you take them to Walmart, it's a screaming fit because the fluorescent lights are flickering like a discotheque. The noise, they feel like they're inside the speaker at the rock concert. It's just complete sensory overload. And you can get this with many different disorders. And there needs to be research on how to treat some of these sensory problems because they can really make life miserable. There's a picture of a little boy putting his hands over his ears. And another problem that you have in brains that have problems is attention-shifting slowness. The processing speed of the brain is slow. It takes much longer to shift back and forth between two different things. And one of the problems in the brain is that the cables that connect up the different brain departments don't wire up right. So the president's office up at the top of the building, he's got one lousy little dial-up connection. And then you might get a bunch of extra cables down in the geek department, like art or math. I mean, some of the important stuff like that is really fun. But the processing speed of the brain is slower. And you've got to give them time to process. And you can sometimes get a condition called clipping, where if I said, Tommy, put your coat in the closet, he might just hear closet. So then you got to say, Tommy, I need to tell you something. Now I got the channel open. Put your coat in your closet. Multitasking, absolutely impossible. I absolutely cannot multitask. There's a lot of entry-level jobs. If I had to be cashier with an old-fashioned cash register in a busy place, making change, it would just be a disaster. It wouldn't work. And some kids, when they go to read, regardless of what the label is, the print will jiggle on the page. And I am finding in my livestock handling class of 60 students, I find one or two of these every semester. And I can tell by the way they do their drawings. Like if I ask them to draw a circle, they're drawing. And I ask them to draw two lines like this for the cattle chute. And I said, what do you see? And they draw it all scribbly. And I said, what are you seeing? They tell me they're seeing waves between the lines. See, in your brain, you got shape, color, motion, and texture circuits. Those have to work together to form images. Scientists do not know how the brain forms a graphics file. It does. It makes graphics files all the time. But how does it form them? How does it store them? That's one of the great mysteries of visual science. You'll get 5 Nobel Prizes if you figure that one out. It's called the binding problem in vision research. They don't have any idea how it works. But something's wrong with it. And for some people, if you get just the right pale colored glasses, like maybe pale purple or pale pink, the print stops jiggling. So I tell them to go down to the Walmart with a book and try on some different colored glasses. And I've had kids come back with glasses and say, oh, now I got an A on my economics quiz because the print no longer jiggles. I had one mom, I sent her shopping for sunglasses, and her 6-year-old went from 5 minutes of shopping at the supermarket to an hour of shopping at the supermarket before she threw a fit for $6.95 at Disneyland, pink glasses. Now, why does that work? I don't know why it works. And they're also sold under the name Irlen lenses, and the only advantage the Irlen lenses have is you can pick the perfect, exact color, and it will work somewhat better. But not everybody on the spectrum has this problem. You see, the sensory issues are very, very variable. I mean, one person will have a hearing sensitivity, another person, the visual system pixelates. I don't know how many here have satellite, and the wind shaking the satellite, and the snow's on it, and it's raining all over the satellite, and the image pixelates. Well, something similar is happening in the visual system, pixelates. It's not working together right. It gets worse when they get tired. Well,